Welcome back to Uplink, the only show on the internet about gaming, ever.
Ever.
Don't look it up. Today we're going to be talking about the acquisition wars that have begun, or what feels like acquisition wars, as both Microsoft and Sony ramp up their buying machines of massive monies to purchase more and more game studios across the world. Recently, we've had big ones like the Activision Blizzard purchase by Microsoft, which is not yet approved, but we're monitoring it. We'll see. They say they're going to be harder on them. We'll see.
Yeah, it feels like the most done deal in the history of done deals.
Well, yes and no.
To me, I don't know.
For me, there's a lot of variables at play that could lead to this maybe not happening as simply and easily as a lot of people seem to think it is. But on top of that purchase, we've had just last week, Sony is buying Bungie.
That would be expensive if you knocked that over.
Could use some Bungies on the back of this. Probably save that. Purchasing Bungie Entertainment for $6.8 billion, which is a pretty big deal because Bungie famously created the Halo franchise.
Yeah.
And in more recent years has created the very popular and well-received and definitely not a grind Destiny series, which is a big deal.
Yeah, everyone knows and loves that very much. No one has any problems with how that game works.
I've never quit, restarted, and then quit again. That's for sure. And I'm certainly not currently, avoiding this new expansion. But that's not here nor there.
For context of that $6.8 billion, I saw a headline the other day that Frontier Airlines bought the entirety of Spirit Airlines for close to only $3 billion. For $3 billion.
Yeah.
You can buy a whole airline for less money than what they bought some of these games, what they're buying some of these games.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that, and I think this has become clear this year, the value of the company is no longer being assessed by what they've created in the past, but instead by the potential of what they could possibly make going forward.
And with anything, it's always IP. With any sort of movie studio, with any sort of gaming studio, now entertainment, it's all about IP. So it just depends on, especially with Activision, the Activision merger deal is the biggest thing is IP.
That's the interesting thing here for me when it comes to the Sony acquisition. I think there's a stark difference between the way Microsoft is purchasing and the way that Sony is purchasing. Sony's purchases this isn't their first purchase in recent memory. They've more recently purchased Bluepoint Games, who has been a remaster/remake studio for them, who did the Shadow of the Colossus remake. They just more recently did the Demon's Souls remake, which was very well done, very well received. They're now an in-house studio for them going forward, which means that they have the ability to remaster and remake fantastic versions of classic games that maybe aren't currently in development.
Which a lot are offered, and that's interesting because when Sony unrolled the PS5, if you do have a PS5, it's a lot of their games that they offered for free
are back catalog
stuff that have been remastered for the PS4 and up, and that's actually really cool. Like sometimes it feels like you may be cheated with new releases, but man, I like playing older games as much.
I mean, look,
like stuff that I missed even on the PlayStation.
Yeah, and that stuff ultimately, that's not even necessarily for us. There's a nostalgia factor that definitely plays into it. I think that just last week we had what week is it? Just about 2 weeks ago we had.
What year is it?
That's how I felt every year since 2019. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But more recently they've had the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection that came out, which is Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy bundled together, remastered for the for the PS5 and for PC. That wasn't done by Bluepoint, but it is a chance for a new group of people who maybe didn't get a chance to play that game or haven't experienced that franchise at all to get a fresh look with the most clean and polished version of it yet. And I think that's the way that Sony's looking at their IPs. They're not looking to acquire new IP and grow a library of well-established new stuff because they already have a back catalog of characters and franchises that have proven to be highly successful things. Spider-Man, God of War, Uncharted, The Last of Us, these games that just kind of exist within their platform that you can't get anywhere else really. They're investing more into that. And I think that even the purchase of Bungie is ultimately to serve that purchase. So let's talk a little bit about what these movements are doing for Sony versus Xbox. So
what does this mean for the acquisition? What does this mean for gaming as we know it?
So and
is it ruined? Are we in an apocalypse?
No, I don't think it's anything like that. But
people are calling the acquisition of Activision like an apocalyptic event.
I do think that it like from a gaming standpoint, from like the industry standpoint, that was the nuclear option between buying Bethesda and Activision Blizzard. That was Microsoft saying, "I'm gonna take another player off the board.
Yeah,
this is mine now." And while they claim they're not gonna hyper exclusivity their stuff. And I really don't think that's what ultimately their stuff is about. If you missed our episode on that acquisition, on the last episode of Uplink, which was starring a different-looking Royden named Robbie, we covered that pretty in depth there. But I don't think that this is ultimately about buying IP for the sake of exclusivity. I think that Microsoft is buying for the sake of Game Pass. Everything they're doing is in service of providing games and feeding things into Game Pass, which they will offer on more and more platforms as they're able to.
But doesn't Game Pass in itself inherently have its own sort of exclusivity brand? Like, I realize that like Microsoft computers are in like every single office building and household in America, but like isn't Game Pass just in its own exclusive sort of thing for
originally,
Xbox?
Sure, yeah, it was definitely a feeling of more of an Xbox exclusive feature. But in more recent years, they've launched the cloud version of it, which you can play off of any mobile device. They've launched the browser version of it, which you can play off any browser on any computer, essentially. And then they have Game Pass for PC now, which is a fully integrated version of Game Pass built specifically for PC that lets you have that library. And they've said before they were allegedly working on a deal that to get Game Pass on Nintendo devices. They don't really care about this platform exclusivity. That's small fish to them. What they care about is that their brand is on every platform, everywhere, which has always been Microsoft's thing. The reason we have Microsoft computers everywhere in the building is because Microsoft made sure that they were the first thing you think of when it comes to a PC.
Yeah.
You're going to think of the Windows operating system.
That'll be interesting. Excuse me. We'll cut that out too. That'll be interesting to see if they make it so big that it's almost impossible for Sony or these other, or Nintendo even, to be like, we can't not have this as an option on our system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like PlayStation, I signed up for 3 months of their sort of Game Pass model where they have the PlayStation Now, where they have old catalogs and they sort of release a year-old games maybe is sort of the bigger option, but it's nothing where it's like sign up for this and you will get this exclusively right now. This game exclusive, PlayStation exclusives right now.
Right.
So it doesn't really even right now even hold a candle to Game Pass.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I like playing all of the older games and having access to some more multiplayer games for cheaper.
For sure.
Because you can stream them or download them. But it'll be interesting to see if they get such a big catalog that it becomes to where these other huge gaming devices have to say, you know what? Let me bite the bullet on this. We're going to have to pay you to upload this onto our platform.
It's unfortunate for PlayStation in particular because, as we discussed in our last episode, they were just about like right on the cusp of announcing what is tentatively called Project Spartacus, which is their revamp of the PlayStation Plus, PlayStation Now service to reflect more of a style similar to Game Pass. I don't think they'll ever have first-party exclusives on day one. They can't eat that cost the way Microsoft can, but they can provide more third-party access to gamers, provide more indie games that way. Anything that's on Game Pass, in theory, that isn't owned by Microsoft could also exist on PlayStation Spartacus service. So Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard removes the ability for them to have things like Call of Duty, which they had an exclusivity contract for content for a long time with, that they removed the ability to have the Bethesda games on there. It's the slow, calculated stuff that's making sure that Sony can't compete with them on the same level, which is maybe where they're going to run into problems later on when talking about this acquisition. But so let's kind of shift gears though talking a lot about the Xbox side of that acquisition. Sony has been gearing up for something completely different. I think that they are still wanting to compete in that Game Pass market, but their recent listings for multiplayer hires across the board, from Insomniac to Naughty Dog, talking about cinematic multiplayer experiences, shows that they're really invested in creating a communal place for gamers and fans of their brands. So instead of buying Bungie to have Destiny, I think they're more so buying Bungie to bolster and bring up the back end of these multiplayer experiences. Maybe they can borrow some of the talent that Bungie has and apply it to other parts of their stuff. They've bought several support studios like Valkyrie and Nexus, I want to say. I can't remember what the other one was, but pardon me for not doing my research on that one. I literally just had the name in my head. But they are both support studios that have previously supported on things like God of War and Halo Infinite and several other games. One of them is a PC port studio, so that's where we're getting a lot of these PC ports from. Those smaller purchases that don't make the big headlines are providing a more solid standing for what is already in place. So I think they're not worried about growing IP necessarily or stripping IP away from Xbox, and more worried about if they're going to take all the other stuff, then our stuff has to be so good that it doesn't matter that they have Call of Duty. It matters that, like, when you think gaming, you think Nintendo and PlayStation, and Xbox is a secondary thought for entertainment.
It feels almost like if you think about it, and I'm going to be this guy for a second, there's no reason that we should all have iPhones in our pocket other than the fact that when you think of a phone, you think of iPhone. Like,
and it had a lot to do with the market.
It has a lot to do with how they marketed it. This is the coolest thing that you need right now.
Right.
But if we're talking about operating systems and everything for years, Droid and Android and all the Google phones and stuff have been lapping them as far as upgrades go.
Yeah.
But nobody wants those green texts.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of the...
Well, yeah, and a lot of
that's
that
kind of the thing. So maybe that works for PlayStation. Maybe they can be... We have the best... They can market that we have the best games right now that people love to play, so much so that it keeps up to date with Xbox. But like I said, the problem is that Xbox is backed by Microsoft. It's the third biggest company ever.
Yeah.
They can just eat that cost.
Yeah, and so they can just... And that's kind of the problem.
So
that
maybe
I think
they can keep up, but it's tough. Like,
yeah,
it's
and
tough when Xbox is just complete... it's just going to eat the cost.
Exactly. And that's what I think they're going to run into a problem with in court, is that they are clearly showing signs of an aggressive party remover, essentially. You're going through and saying, all right, well, if I can't beat the competition straight up, I can buy out the remaining competition so that the main competitor I have has less options to bolster their platform. Because when we're talking platform to platform, now if the acquisition of Activision Blizzard goes through, that'll put Microsoft within range of having more studios than PlayStation currently has in-house. Mm-hmm. And while there's only so much that they can do, I do think this is going to be the last massive buy that we see from these companies, because you'll notice that the purchases that are happening of American companies. Mm-hmm. Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, Bungie. These are all companies that exist in North America as their main base of operation. And the reason for that is it's easier to do here. In Japan and Europe, you're going to run into a lot more walls and barriers. It's super difficult to just purchase another gaming company off of, from Japan, because they're, for one, far less likely to just sell straight up, and two, it's not controlled through like normal share boards in the way that we have here.
Well, and also too, and this is just on principle, Japan is really big about holding on to their IP. Like, the same dude has owned like Pokemon for the entirety of its existence. So, it's like, and that may be incorrect, but I think it's like the same company has owned the licensing for Pokemon forever. Dragon Ball Z has never really
Toei
changed.
Animation,
and
Pokemon Company.
A bunch of that stuff has never changed hands. And of course, Nintendo has been able to hold on to the most popular video game character, Mario, for years and years, and it's easier for them just to tell you no.
And it's just like the laws there don't allow for this like kind of straight up like I'm just gonna for cash purchase this entire company now, please. I know I already own a lot of this, this type of industry, but for cash, I'd like to buy this one. If I could please to own this, I will.
You would think in America, after what we've been through as a country, we would say, monopolies might be bad.
Yeah, you would think that, but again, you take a look at some of the top performing markets, and you're gonna be not surprised by who's up there.
Right. No, going all the way back to the multiplayer thing, do we think this will work with their in-house IP that they have? Because we love Insomnia, and Spider-Man's been one of the best games that I've played in a long time. I do some of these solo single-player games like that, God of War. Do they work in the same way with players wanting to play them like that as we think that we do? Because we saw how badly Division failed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's so from a like our perspective.
Yeah.
Division did fail, but from a sales perspective, Division 1 and 2 both performed very well. Division 2 is still going with a pretty active player base. What I think we're looking at here is less a story of because Ubisoft's game style is outdated and is archaic compared to what I think we're going to be getting here. Let's kind of run down just a few ideas that I have that I think that they are maybe heading towards. So previously in The Last of Us, they had the multiplayer mode, which pit different factions up against each other. I think they're going to expand that out into a survival third-person shooter where you're going to be able to team up with one faction or the other, similar to like an MMO, but you'll exist on a perpetual landscape and cultivate like your own community and stuff, and then you pick one of the factions, and that's the faction you play with now. That's the at least for the season or whatever. Mm-hmm. I can totally see that happening. Insomniac has an obvious choice up their sleeve. They can either go one of two routes. They can go the Ratchet and Clank multiple dimensions, means there's an infinite number of Ratchet and Clank combos, so you just have everyone create their own Lombax style character with their own robot companion, and then there's the hub of Ratchet and Clanks or whatever, or they can go the way that Sony went with the animated Spider-Man movies and go for the Spider-Verse look. And I think that's probably where they're going to go is the structuring of the missions and stuff for Spider-Man, but multiplayer setting where you're working together to take out raid bosses in the form of like Rhino or Green Goblin or Doc Ock or whatever it is.
Where this fails though is my thing. You like say none of your online friends are playing. They're all asleep or they're working or something, and you're at home playing. The problem becomes with what you're saying is playing with a bunch of people. Like I don't know if any of y'all have played Red Dead Redemption or GTA Online. It's chaos.
And I don't think they'll go that route. I think it would be more like you get into the open world and you're swinging alone by yourself, but whenever you want to go do like a mission or interact with the world, you can either invite people in or you can open up your server, your space, whatever you want to call it, to people to come in and join you up to like 4 people at a time, so that it limits the amount of chaos. You also, obviously, they're not going to create a Spider-Man game where people can grief you, because that would be insane. But yeah, I think that it's going to be more about building these community of style games, a la like Monster Hunter World, where people work together to solve a common cause versus like these PvP heavy games. I do think that they are eventually going to work with Guerrilla Games on creating either first person revamp of Killzone, where they make that the Halo killer, or try to make that the Halo killer again. I don't think you'll be able to kill Halo, but a Halo competitor at the very least. Or they go the other way and they make Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West kind of first person.
That seems like a place where
multiplayer game where you're working together to hunt down really big, monsters, or maybe a team is like in control of robots they're in the game too, but they get to have robots, and one team has to hunt down the robots and then take out the enemy players.
Well, that seems like a game just destined for just the way and the look and the style of it. I know it's like one main character the entire time you play, but that seems like a game that will allow you, it just is destined to allow you to make an avatar and make, be able to customize it with just colors and how bright it is and everything. It just looks like a game that is made for an eventual multiplayer.
And we've already seen multiplayer kind of, nailed pretty well for some of the Sony IPs, with the most recent iteration being the Legends mode for Ghost of Tsushima, which did a great job of offering a wide variety of missions that had their own story to them. There's also a survival mode, a horde mode. There's like a challenge mode. Now there's a duel mode, so you can battle up against other players.
I'm surprised that wasn't there at launch, to be really honest.
Making games is hard.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
But I do think that we're going to see more stuff like that. I would love to see like a City of Heroes. That's a really, really old callback. But a City of Heroes style Infamous game where you get to make your Infamous character and imbue them with a certain power, and then you guys work together and you can choose good or evil. There's karmic action, so then you become essentially a faction of people. You can be a middle ground person who works together with either side. PvP and PvE stuff. Again, you'd limit the amount of griefing that can happen, but you would make that world more inviting to this communal kind of effort.
The problem inherent becomes is like, you have all of these interesting games that allow you to do all these different things that Sony has. I'm interested to see what they do with a lot of the Naughty Dog stuff. I liked some of the Uncharted 4 multiplayer was a little weird.
Yeah, it was factions, but
it was fun.
But Uncharted.
It just really, like, the nuclear option, like you said, is that all of a sudden, and to go back to the Microsoft thing, that Microsoft says only we have Call of Duty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which I feel is unlikely.
It's unlikely because the sales wouldn't make any sense.
Well, and also for the next 3 years, anyways, they're already locked in. They have to fulfill.
Yeah, the sales wouldn't make any sense. I'm just saying, if they chose to say, look, we no longer, we're going to just have Call of Duty as an exclusive, the most well-known first-person shooter, multiplayer shooter out there, what does Sony do to combat that? And obviously, they'd probably come up with their own first-person war shooter. But, like, I don't know. Like, that becomes like all of a sudden you have to think on your feet really quickly to get the classic battle royale thing that we all have come to love for years and years and years, or team deathmatch thing that we've all come to love for years.
I do think that there's a bit of Call of Duty fatigue, and I think that one of the first best calls that if Microsoft is going to do this, and they're doing it for the reasons that they say they're doing it, which is to create a better workplace for the Activision Blizzard employees, because we care, and that's the only reason we bought.
Crunch is definitely not a thing. Yeah, it's not going to be a thing anymore.
We don't do that. Don't worry about that. We don't do that. But I do think that the best thing that they could do here is say, okay, Call of Duty is an exclusive, but we're only dedicating one of the 3 studios, probably Infinity Ward, to the creation of core Call of Duty games, and those will now come out every 2 to 3 years versus every 1 year.
That actually would help.
And then in between that, one of the other 2 studios will take over working on Warzone. And then the 3rd studio gets to go off and create another franchise, a whole new IP, maybe a different first-person shooter even, that can be exclusive to Xbox, bringing Call of Duty style gameplay to Xbox without necessarily, so they can keep their promise of not making it exclusive, but the next thing from Call of Duty is exclusive.
Yeah,
I think that's the best bet that they can do, because just looking at some of the responses from like people who work on Call of Duty titles year in, year out, it's exhausting to work on the same franchise forever, and you get locked into this.
And it hasn't really made any. Once they jumped the shark, sorry to interrupt you, but once they jumped the shark and they made everything like exosuits and everything, and then had to double back to do it, you could tell that they were like, man, we are running out of ideas of making this a yearly title.
Honestly, I'm in the minority here, but I actually thought Infinite Warfare was like a super cool concept.
A lot of people did. It's one of the best-selling games ever.
But the problem was, I think that after they did that, they went too far into this whole sci-fi thing. So then the next 2 games were like drawn back sci-fi, but they were still sci-fi, but they just didn't feel like genuine Call of Duty titles. I do think that they jumped the shark with the trailer showing all the space combat, because that was only
2 seconds,
10% of the game maybe, and none of the multiplayer took place in space. So I don't think that it's going to be a problem of ideas so much as in order for them to satiate the people on the opposite end of this, speaking like in a political style, the other aisle, they're going to have to say, okay, well, we're not making this franchise exclusive. But the next thing from that, the creators of that franchise is. And so we'll keep doing this at the level that it's being done by one studio. And then everything else from that franchise that isn't the core Call of Duty titles is going to be exclusive to Xbox. Same thing goes for maybe they release the next Spyro the Dragon game on all platforms, but then maybe the Spyro the Dragon, first-person shooter is exclusive to, or Spyro the Dragon RPG.
Spyro the Dragon has a Glock 9.
Yeah.
I think
instead of believing he's a Firefly, he believes he was raised in a firefight.
Hey. Oh my God. No, they feel like a workman-like company where they just have to get their stuff out there and into places.
Yeah. Well, and they just now figured out how to, I think last year was the first year in a long time I've seen Microsoft receive praise and even win a Game of the Year nomination for a game they put out. Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5 were both on many lists.
Great from all.
Forza Horizon 5 was IGN's pick for Game of the Year, for whatever that means to you personally. But I think that this is going to be less of Sony coming in with these multiplayer games and putting out a bunch of them back to back to back. The plan here is to create live service games that can exist once created and then continue onward for the next 10 years of content while single player stuff fills in gaps between storylines.
Yeah.
I think that if they do it right and they don't rush it, there's a chance that they can create something that Microsoft just can't brute force their way into. They can't force their way into people's minds by just buying all the companies, because ultimately what stands out in gaming a lot of the times is what is wholeheartedly a well-perfected quality game and story. I don't think that Microsoft buying Call of Duty means Microsoft won. I think it means that Microsoft bought Call of Duty and is hoping that really helps them bolster their Game Pass service. I think that they think that pulling from some of this IP that's already out there and saying, okay, but what have you not made recently? Because there's a lot of backlog Activision Blizzard stuff that they just haven't touched. I mean, they may even revitalize things like the third-person StarCraft game, which I would be down for. A stealth ops sci-fi StarCraft game? Hell yeah. Check that box.
I haven't thought about an Activision game not named Call of Duty in forever, to be completely honest.
It's not often. You get like those Crash Bandicoots and Spyros every so often, Tony Hawk, which Microsoft now legally gets Tony Hawk to come live at Phil Spencer's house. That's
that is
legal.
Actually,
that's how that happens.
He built a half pipe in his backyard.
Yeah. There's like one of those hamster feeders out there for him, so that he's safe.
Needs a Mountain Dew. The thing though too is that Crash Bandicoot, doesn't Naughty Dog still own Crash Bandicoot?
No.
Or no, Activision.
Activision owns it. Naughty Dog created it, but Activision currently owns both that and Spyro.
Yeah, I'm sure the people at Naughty Dog love that.
I'm sure they don't care at this point. They've got enough on their plate. But and I don't think that if Microsoft wants to keep this image of player-friendly, community-friendly, they need to be sure to reach across the aisle every so often and say, hey, look, I know we bought everything, but here are these games that are still coming to this platform. I'm not here to be the boogeyman and take away all your stuff. I'm here to make sure these games have backing with a lot of money behind them to make sure that they get to be well-made and have the time that they need. So, kind of in conclusion here, because we're been running long. I'm sure we're talking up a storm, hurting someone's ear somewhere. I think that the gaming industry is growing in an interesting way. I'm not big on these massive acquisitions. Do I think this is an acquisition war? No, because these ideas and purchases were happening long before the news releases. I think it's a coincidence that Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard acquisition came a mere 2 weeks before the Bungie announcement. But I do think that if Microsoft wants a war, that they will get one.
They'll probably win too.
They'll win in terms of sheer buying power. I don't know that that's going to translate to big numbers in terms of getting people to come in droves to their platform.
Yeah,
we'll have to see how they handle the actual development process and releases.
Yeah, not necessarily. They can always eat the cost on anything that they want to do. It's like when Disney, like for the uninformed, it's like when Disney bought Marvel and then just was like, you know what, we just want the rest of the characters besides Spider-Man. So we're just gonna buy Fox too.
Yeah.
So they bought Fox. Like they just bought so it's like they have the money and they will eventually win out with that, I think, for a lot of things.
Or decide that the cost is getting too high up there, so they need to stop and start working. I think the best thing Microsoft can do is say, all right, if this gets approved, we're good. We don't need to buy anything else. We've got 30 plus studios that we now have to work with to get games out and make sure they're well managed, because the bigger the empire, the less control. And it is far more difficult to handle the HR problems and the technical issues across the board at these companies if you're too widespread and too spread thin. I think it's going to be a real challenge for them going forward. So I'm interested to see how it's going, and we're gonna.
That has been a history lesson about Rome.
We do a little history here as a treat.
That's all I got.
Yeah, so we're going to keep a close eye on all this. If you're interested in seeing more about that Microsoft acquisition situation, you can check out our last episode. We recently just reviewed Seafood. We'll have a few more reviews going up. We had a martial artist come on, my brother, but that is it's not important.
Uncharted retrospective coming up.
We got an Uncharted retrospective coming up, and we'll have more from the latest gaming news, previews, and reviews right here on Hardwired. For Uplink and Hardwired, I'm Andrew Hamilton.
I'm Royden Ogletree.
Catch you next time.